All right. So what's going on, everybody? What's up? This your girl Tiffany coming through live in effect right here um on StreamYard. So as you can see, that's my Cash App information if you want to go ahead and you know contribute, donate to what I'm doing or whatnot. Also, if you're watching from YouTube, make sure you subscribe to the channel. If you're watching from Facebook, make sure you also share this video. So real quick, right? Um, get this off of here real quick. So I won't be on here very long, but I want to do the video, right? Talking about 23andMe. So 23andMe has traced anybody that know about 23andMe is the DNA company, right? They deal with DNA tests, looking for people's ancestry and things like that. Well, they have traces the violent history of African Americans, right? So I do have the information here. And what I want to do is I want to go ahead and share it with you guys. All right, just give me a second. So I would like to share this information with you all. Okay, there we go, right here. So I'm on New York Times, and it says large DNA. Okay. It says large DNA study traces violent history of American slavery. It says scientists from the consumer genetics company 23andMe have published the largest DNA study to date of people with African ancestry in the Americas. And it was written on July 23rd. It was updated today at 6:40 a.m. And as you can see, it says more than 1.5 centuries after transatlantic slave trade ended, a new study shows how the brutal treatment of enslaved people has shaped the DNA of their descendants. The report, which included more than 50,000 people, 30,000 of them with African ancestry, agrees with the historical record about where people were taken from in Africa, and they were enslaved in Americas, but it also found some surprises. All right, so let me pull this up. Okay. And down here it says, for example, the DNA of participants from the United States show a significant amount of Nigerian ancestry, far more than expected based on the historical records of ships carrying enslaved people directly to the United States from Nigeria. At first, historians working with the researchers couldn't believe the amount of Nigerian ancestry in the U.S., said Stephen Machete, what's his name, Machete, and a population geneticist at 23andMe who led the study. All right, and so that's just a picture. After consulting another historian, the researchers learned that enslaved people were sent from Nigeria to the British Caribbean and then were further traded into the United States, which could explain the genetic findings. Let's read that again. The researchers learned that enslaved people were sent from Nigeria to the British Caribbean and then were further traded into the United States, which could explain the genetics finding, he said. Now, the study illuminates one of the darkest chapters of the world history in which 12.5 million people were forcibly taken from their homelands in tens of thousands of European ships. It also shows that the historical and genetic records together tells a more layered, uh, intimate story than either could alone. And then let's stop right there. Okay, let's start right there. Excuse me. Sorry about that, you guys. Excuse my hands. Excuse my hands. Okay, bumpy. Get all that. Anyways. Okay, anyways. So, for all you naysayers out there that says DNA is a lie, right? DNA has been debunked. DNA testing is not that is inaccurate. Well, it's just showing you the information that confirm that the transatlantic slave trade indeed took place and indeed happened. It did exist because based on the traits of many African Americans, right? Many of us carry Nigerian ancestry. So that should tell you something. If a lot of us have Nigerian or a high percentage of Nigerian ancestry, that means that a lot of our ancestors came up out of that region. A large portion of our ancestors came up out of that area and was transported over here to the Americas, right? And many of them, wait a minute, then also it says many of them was mentioned, was sent over to the Caribbeans, and then they was transported over to the United States. So if you got an argument to debunk or disprove or discredit, then I can be willing to listen. But if you cannot disprove or discredit this information by using science, scientific information, then you really don't have an argument. You really don't stand on a foundation. You really can't disprove that because here is a genetic company shown that based on the DNA components, the DNA composition of African Americans, it traces back the violent and brutal history of African Americans, and their as far as their descendant is concerned. So let's go back and read some more. All right. And then right here, it says the study, which was published on Thursday in the American Journal of Human Genetics or Genetics, represent the real progress in how we think that genetics contributes to telling a story about the past, said Alondra Nelson, a professor of social science at the Institute for Advanced Study in Princeton, New Jersey, who was not involved in the study. Then it goes on to say, although the work is commendable for making use of both historical and genetic DNA, Dr. Nelson said it was also a missed opportunity to take the full step and really collaborate with historians. The history of the different ethnic groups in Africa, for example, and how they related to modern and historical geographic boundaries could have been explored in greater depth, she said. The study began as a dream project of Joanna Mountain, Senior Director of Research at 23andMe, even before the company had any customers. Over 10 years, she and her team built a genetic database. Primarily, the participants were 23andMe customers whose grandparents were born in one of the geographic regions of transatlantic slavery. All participants consented to have their DNA used in the research. In the new study, Dr. Micheletti team compared this genetic database with a historical one, Slave Voyage, which contained an enormous amount of information about slavery, such as ports of embarkation and disembarkation and numbers of enslaved men, women, and children. Now, isn't that something? Isn't that something where you can find out based on someone's genetics, going back to their ancestry, just based on people's genetics altogether, of the the number of people that were enslaved in that one geographical region. This is why science is very important. This is why science should be taken into consideration. Because see, it's an ongoing research. And with science, you can always correct information too if there's an error. So it's a constant research, it's non-stop. It is non-stop. You continuously research at all times. Non-stop. But then you got those who try to debunk DNA, but they don't have enough evidence to debunk it. They don't have enough evidence to validate or to prove or disclaim that genetics doesn't work or it's invalid. Let's continue. Okay. So it says which contains the researcher also consulted with some historians to identify gaps in their data. Dr. Mountain said historians told them, for example, that they needed representation from critical regions like Angola and the Democratic Republic of Congo. The team worked with academics connected to West African institutions to find that data. The size of, that's right, you're absolutely right, science will get them every time, correct. The size of the project's dataset is extraordinary, said David Rich, a professor of genetics at Harvard who was not part of the project. Because it drew participants from a direct to consumer database of millions of people, the study was able to ask and answer questions about the past and about how people are related to each other that could not be asked by academics like himself, he said. At best, academic projects are able to study hundreds or a few thousands people. Generally, that data does not also include the geological information that the 23andMe research participant provided. Then it goes on down here to say the finding shows remarkable alignment with the historical record. Historians have estimate, for example, that 5.7 million people were taken from West Central Africa to the Americas, and the genetic record shows a very strong connection between people in West Central Africa, not people in Israel, not people in Egypt, not people in Saudi Arabia, but people in West Central Africa and all people with African ancestry in the Americas. Historians have also noted that people who were taken to Latin America from Africa disembarked from West Central Africa, but many were taken originally from other regions like Senegambia and the Bight of Benin. And the new genetic evidence support this, showing that the descendant of enslaved people in Latin America generally carry genetic connection with two or three of these regions in Africa. Then it goes on to say historical evidence shows that enslaved people in the United States and the British Caribbean, by contrast, were taken from a large number of regions of Africa. Their descendants today show a genetic connection to the people in 6 regions in Africa, the study found. And so, do you see that? So, the more that you have people getting involved in DNA testing, right? And based on the results, it can help historians better. I'll make sure I do so. It can help historians better further their research and look more into details about those descendants in the geographical regions. So science help reshape history. I'm going to say again, science can reshape history, and it will reshape history. It would help further more research into the background of people ancestry, by looking at slavery. So in this case, it's very accurate. And there's no reason to lie. Nobody has to make up this type of stuff. You got the genetics proving it. You got the science proving it. You got historians that validate this. And you got the science that validate the historians. There's no reason to make up information like this. You can't tell me all the stuff they teach. I don't care what they teach in the conscious community. They cannot come back and discredit or disprove a lot of this information. Because you got historical trademarks, right? You got archives, you got genetics that could debunk and discredit all the stuff they talking about, all the outdated information that you guys been listening to. But let's see what else they talking about on here. Let's read what else they say in this article. Oops. Okay. Sorry about that. Okay, so it says the historical records shows that of 10.7 million enslaved people who embarked in the Americas, nearly 2 million others died on the journey. More than 60% were men, but the genetic record shows that it was mostly enslaved women who contribute to present day gene pool. The asymmetry in the experience of enslaved men and women, and indeed many groups of men and women in century past, is well understood. Enslaved men often died before they had a chance to have children. Enslaved women were often raped and forced to have children. The 23andMe project found this general pattern, but also uncovered a startling difference in the experience of men and women between regions in the Americas. The scientists calculate that enslaved women in the United States contribute 1.5 times more to the modern day gene pool of people of African descent than enslaved men. In the Latin Caribbean, they contribute 13 times more. In North South America, they contribute 17 times more. And then it goes on to say, what's more, the United States European men contribute 3 times more to the modern day gene pool of people of African descent than European women did. In the British Caribbean, they contribute 25 times more. The genetic evidence, the scientists say, may be explained by local practice. The United States segregation between enslaved people and the European population may have made it more likely that the child of an enslaved mother would have an enslaved father. But in other regions where enslaved men were less likely to reproduce, dangerous practice like rice farming, in which harsh condition and muddy fields made it easier to drown and malaria was common, may have linked many of them before, may have killed many of them before they could have children. Okay. Check this out. Check this out. In some regions in Latin America, the government enacted programs that brought men from Europe to father children with enslaved women in order to intentionally diminish the African gene pool. Let's read that again. In regions in Latin America, the government enacted programs that brought men from Europe to father children with enslaved women in order to intentionally diminish the African gene pool. In other words, they want to minimize the African population, right, by creating children that were biracial. Now, listen, let's read this. The study illustrates how much physical and sexual violence were part of slavery and how they are still built into our society, Dr. Nelson said. It confirms the mistreatment, discrimination, sexual abuse, and the violence that have persisted for generations, she said, and that many people are protesting today. Okay, Jerome, you're gonna have to send that book into my inbox. Whatever it is that you're talking about. All right, and then there was a correction. On July 23rd, 2020, an earlier version of this article was imprecise in discussing some historical research. Historical research do exist showing that enslaved people were shipped directly from Nigeria to the United States, but not to the extent indicated by the new genetic evidence. Okay, so based on, give me a second, you guys. All right. Okay. So based on that information, right? Basically, who played the most effective role in our gene pool today were the enslaved women more more than the enslaved men, because many of the men died during slavery, right? And a lot of the women were raped. So if you look into your genetics and you find out that you got a lot of European, that you have some European ancestry, right? For many of us, I'm talking about going back further back into slavery. For many of us, we're going to come to find out that that was more than likely our maternal ancestor, right, was raped by a European man, more than likely. And then again, you had those that were involved in interracial relationship. There were those who got involved in interracial relationship and things like that. But with the gene pool that we have, most of it come from our ancestors, our maternal ancestors being raped by the European men. Because the reason why they did that is because they wanted to create more slaves. They wanted to produce more slaves. Because remember, it was all about profit. It was all about building up economics. And so the more slaves that you have, the more profit that you're going to make. And they did not really want, and you read the information, I just read the information to you. They did not really want in Latin America, they did not really want Africans just reproducing with each other willfully. Like they didn't want them to be a family unless they forced them to, unless they were forcing them to breed with each other, right? But other than that, they wanted to control the narrative of the African family dynamic. That's what the European wanted to do. They want to control the family structure. They want to show that they were dominant. And how did they do it? One of the ways they did it was by raping the women. So your ancestor is the reason why you may have a European ancestry, because your maternal ancestor was a byproduct of rape. Or you may have somebody, of course, 9 times out of 10, you got somebody in your family that's biracial somewhere down the line, due to the fact that the enslaved women were taken advantage of. They were sexually abused. They didn't have protection. The men couldn't protect them because they were killing them off. And then some of them were traumatized. They were too scared. Because if they were going to protect their women, then they was going to end up dead. And then you got to remember, family was separated from each other. You had families that were sent off in other countries, right? In Latin America, in the Caribbean, South America, and some stayed in the United States. So families were separated from each other. They didn't see each other at all ever again. So they were forced to deal with the families of the slave master. They had to look at the slave master family as their own, because they don't have a connection with their biological family. And yes, you're right, brother. There were men that were sodomized too. Absolutely. There were men that were sodomized. So, with that being said, that debunks all this notion about there's DNA is a lie, there's no such thing as DNA, and it's not true. That goes to show you that individuals who make up that kind of information have not studied into depth or more detail about genetics. They have not learned about what it means to take a DNA test. They don't know science. They don't know that science and history correlates to each other. They work in hands. So without science, you really ain't got that much history. And without history, you can't really have science. So they have to work with each other in order to help tell the story of the people, or bring the anthropology of our society. So anthropology not only deals with history, but it also deals with science. That's why I'm encouraging everybody to look up the transatlantic slave trade, right? If you want to, you can go on blackdemographic.com. Blackdemographic.com gives you the outline of how many people were sent over to the Americas, and what tribes they came from, and what regions in the continent they came from. And this is why I do daily Black history all the time, because again, it's to give more exposure and bring information to the light. Bring our information to the light. Present our source and show that this is the historical events that took place. Okay, then, brother, make sure you send that into my inbox. Make sure you send that into my inbox, please. If you have the PDF, send it into my inbox. He said, as a matter of fact, let me post up your comment on here. The brother said there's a book called The History and Geography of Human Genes by Lucia Cavalli Sforza. So I appreciate that. Make sure you send that into the inbox. But anyways, ladies and gentlemen, I didn't want to hold you guys up. I just wanted to talk about that because I think that that's a very important topic, and I like the article, and you guys should check it out. It's on NewYorkTimes.com, and the name of the article is called "Large DNA Study Traces Violent History of American Slavery." So I'm going to so yeah, if you want that link, I will send the link to you guys individually. If that's what you want, if you want the link. For those of you that are on Facebook. Yeah, but other than that, you all have a wonderful evening and be safe. And also check out my brothers that's going to do this debate about, are we African, are we indigenous, or are we Moors? All right, that debate coming up tomorrow at 11:15 p.m. Eastern time. So be looking forward to that. I'm hosting it on my channel, so be looking forward to it. And also, if you are watching from YouTube and you like the content, you like the stuff that I posted, go ahead and subscribe to the YouTube channel. Make sure you share the channel. If you are on Facebook and you want to share my video, you're more than welcome to do so. With that being said, ladies and gentlemen, please stay safe, be easy, and we will reconnect. All right. May peace and power elevation be to all of you. And thank you for tuning in. All right. Deuces. And this your girl Tiffany, and I'm out. All right.